Boa noite, sejam bem-vindos, sejam bem-vindas. O pessoal está chegando, mais uma noite da nossa INIA Summit. Estou aqui mais uma vez com vocês, agradecendo a presença, a pontualidade. Quem está chegando, se puder abrir sua câmera e se renomear, porque vocês estão entrando todos com o nome de Leandro. É muito engraçado, né? Todo mundo tá entrando como. Tá cheio de Leandro na sala, né? Olha lá. É muito bom. Recapitulando, segunda-feira eu abri o evento falando sobre contextualizando a saúde mental no Brasil e no mundo. Falei sobre os primeiros socorros em saúde mental. Aí trouxemos a Mariana Clark e também que ela falou sobre o capitalismo consciente e a Patrícia Lin falando sobre o Instituto Heart Medical, a coerência cardíaca, os benefícios para vocês e para a empresa. Ontem tivemos com o Bruno Ferraz falando sobre ESG na prática e também com a Isabela Muniz, e ela trouxe a ecopsicologia como um tema principal. Hoje temos uma participação especial, de uma grande amiga, sou admiradora do trabalho dela, já há muito tempo, estou aqui com o livro dela em mãos. A Deborah Connors, ela vai hoje nos dar um grande presente. Ela tem, assim, tem muita sabedoria, muito conhecimento, tem contribuído demais com as organizações, levando todo, né, essas boas práticas, as grandes boas práticas da psicologia positiva. Enfim, eu vou deixar ela vai trazer aqui, ela vai poder se apresentar e vocês vão adorar. Já fica a dica, hashtag fica a dica, para seguir ela no LinkedIn, na página dela. Ela tem cursos incríveis, tanto gravados como presenciais e ao vivo. Enfim, realmente vale muito a pena vocês conhecerem ainda mais o trabalho dela. Obrigado, Débora, pela sua disponibilidade. É, Antes dela iniciar, não sei se todo mundo está familiarizado, que tem um botãozinho lá embaixo chamado de interpretação. A Débora, ela vai dar a palestra dela em inglês. Para quem quiser escutar a tradução simultânea, se vocês clicarem no botãozinho de interpretação, tem um globo, é um globo lá embaixo. Vocês vão poder escolher o botãozinho português. Deixa eu até ver aqui a Carolina que está fazendo a tradução simultânea. Olha lá, para ouvir a tradução, por favor, clique no globo, interpretação e selecione português. Tá? Com isso, vocês vão escutar direto a tradução simultânea e vai ser muito legal, tá? Para vocês poderem acompanhar. Quem quiser acompanhar no áudio original, mantém nesse canal, tá? Que a gente vai escutar a Débora falando em inglês. Deixa eu ver. Ju.
Só um detalhe, não sei se para vocês também tá assim. Para mim, eu tenho que clicar nos três pontinhos na barra inferior da minha tela. Eu tenho que
Boa.
clicar nos três pontinhos, aí aparece interpretação, o globo. Oi, Carol. E aí sim eu consigo acessar, tá? O globo, ele não aparece logo de cara, dependendo da tela.
Obrigado, Ju. Eu acho que agora acho que está funcionando, né? Acho que a Débora deve estar escutando agora a Carolina. Não, está me escutando. Ok. Débora, are you ready to go?
I am ready. I have no idea what you just said, but I'm sure it was all good.
I send a lot of love to you and all.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm very happy to join you from Canada. I was saying earlier, I have some pictures on my slides of around the place that I live on Vancouver Island. This picture is not my town, but it's across the island from me in Tofino, Ucluelet. So if you ever come, there's some beautiful sights on Vancouver Island. I would love for you to pull up the chat box if you haven't already. And I did say hello in there, and I see that people have been saying hello. And I use the chat box a lot. I will ask you a lot of questions and have you put your comments in the chat box. And if you have questions, you can put them in there. I realized today, though, that I won't be able to understand anything that's in the chat box. So at some points in time, I will ask for some, interpretation of what's there so we can work that into the talk, but it's all good. So my first question for you, and this is just something to think about, and that is, let me see if my slides will work. There we go. Every workplace tells a story. And what is the story in your workplace? Is your workplace one of burnout and exhaustion and overwork, which it would be normal? Many workplaces are that way. Or is it a workplace of energy and resilience and high performance? So what is your workplace? Often, if we want to create a healthier culture, we have to positively deviate from what the norm is in our organization. And so that's the first thing we're going to talk about is positive deviance. How do we deviate positively from the norm? What can we do from an organizational perspective, from a team perspective, as leaders, from a personal perspective? We're going to talk about the science behind positivity. So what do we know about positive emotion and what happens to us as our positive emotion increases? How do we become better leaders? And also, what do we know about positive interactions in our teams? And as those increase, how does that affect us and what are the results? So we'll talk about that. We're going to start with like an organizational look at culture change. So what is a model, a framework that we could use? I want to share with you one that I use with my clients, and you can use it too. It's readily available. And then we'll move to what do we do with teams? So if you don't have influence over your organization as a whole, you can have influence over your team. And how do you create more positive and resilient teams? And why do you want to do that? And then we will move to us as leaders. How do we change our own practices? How do we shift ourselves to become better leaders to lead culture change? So the research, let me move this. Well, first of all, let me ask you to think about your best work experience. So it might be, you had a great boss, you worked on a great team, what is that experience? Where were you? What point in time? And what I'd like you to do is think if you had to say one word to describe that best work experience, what would that word be? And you could put those words up in the chat box right now. So I'll give you a minute to just write some words to describe your best. So Juliana says connection, and Andre says trust. Yeah. What else?
Deborah,
Yep.
if you should listen to Caroline,
Yep.
if you can click in the interpretation and then Portuguese, Caroline, right? Yeah.
And where do I do that?
There is three
And more?
point,
Yeah.
yes, and a little globe, and then interpretation, and then
You know, I saw it earlier, but I don't see it now.
uh,
And that's okay. Like,
Sorry, guys.
yeah,
Caroline just sent you a message on the chat,
thank you.
giving you instructions,
Okay.
so you can hear her
Yes.
translating into English.
Okay.
click on a globe, interpretation, and
Okay.
select English. Yeah.
And I don't see that. Sorry, I
And
can't
your
see.
globe could be on the bottom right if you have like three dots on the bottom right on your screen.
I
on your
don't
screen?
know.
You don't.
I'm looking at my top bar and I have 3 dots up there and it's
Mhm.
more and it's got a lot of things, but it doesn't have interpretation. But
Maybe
that's,
because you're sharing slides, perhaps?
I am sharing slides, yeah, so that might be why. But
Yeah.
that's okay. That's
All right.
okay. I'm
Mhm.
just going to ask Andre
Mhm.
to just read out a few of the things that people said.
Yes, let's see. Uh, tá, tá, tá. Leandro, e Leandros que estão entrando, se vocês puderem se renomear, que muita gente está entrando como Leandro, tá? É,
So in English.
yeah, no, I'm talking to some Leandros.
Okay.
I think everyone wrote in English, right? Yeah,
I see some, well, I see. There was just that. Okay.
yeah.
So learning, thank you. Trust, resilience.
Mhm.
Thank you, everyone, for
Uh-huh.
being multilingual. Recognition, purpose. Okay, awesome. Now I want you to think about your worst experience. What is the worst work experience you ever had? And something's going to come to your mind right away. And what is one word to describe that? And just put that up in the chat box. Abuse. Yeah, I think we've all experienced these things. Discouragement, maybe micromanagement. I have experienced that before. Disrespect, yeah. Okay, as you're
Mhm.
adding those, I just want to say, like, if we were in person, I would be having you write these down. Hopelessness, someone says, and putting them up on a big board, and we would be looking at them. And I've done this, hundreds of times with organizations, and people use different words, but they're always describing the same thing. So, the words are similar. They're describing something. And what is it that we are describing? If you want to put your answers, your thoughts in the chat box, what are we trying to describe? When we think about our best or our worst workplace and what comes to mind, we're talking about something in the workplace. What is it? The culture, Andre says. Yes, we're talking about the culture. You don't think, 40 years ago, I worked in this workplace and they had this great lunch and learn seminar. Like, we don't really remember those things. We remember how we felt. We remember how we were treated. We remember those practices. So what we're trying to do when we're trying to improve the culture is we want to create a culture where people can flourish. And if I'm flourishing, I am engaged, I'm creative, I'm contributing my best, I am functioning at a very highly productive level. So how can we create the kind of culture where people can flourish? And this is a slide from my book with just some of the things that happen when we create a culture where people are flourishing. We feel positive. We are continually renewed. We are resilient. We're engaged. We're more innovative and creative. We exceed expectations. We're happy. And so if we're trying to improve the culture or move away from some of our old patterns, as I mentioned earlier, what we're trying to do is positively deviate from that norm. And to positively deviate means to just intentionally change our habits to move from the norm in a positive direction for a positive purpose. And there is a tipping point. So when a number of people start to change their behavior in a workplace or a team, when you reach this tipping point, the research shows it's much easier for the change to dissipate around like the rest of the team or the organization. What do you think the percentage is of that tipping point? How many people need to change in order for big change to happen? Is it 10%, 50%? What do you think? Put that in the chat box. Good question. Yes. It's interesting. Just guess. What do you think? Okay, 1%, 30%, 30, 20. So you're pretty close. It's actually only 25%. So if you have a team, if you think about, if I have a team of 12 people and only 3 of them start to do something differently, that's 25%. And those 3 people, if they continue to do things more positively, that's going to rub off on the rest of the people. It starts to it starts to spread. And so it's just like the, the ripple in the pond. We get a certain percentage, that 25%, and then we can start to create real change. The good news is that we can change our minds. And I don't mean we can change our mind about what we're having for dinner or what we wear, or we can change our mind. We can change the way our brain works. And there are practices that help to rewire our brains for the better, which is a good thing because, as you probably know, we have a negativity bias. So if we're not doing things to change our brain for the better, we tend to go to the negative first. We go to this part of our brain where we want to protect ourselves, where we're defensive. We sometimes call that the reptile brain. And that's a normal thing to do. That's how we have evolved, but we can change that. And we can do practices that take us more into our frontal cortex, where we connect more with people, where we see more possibilities. In order to do that, we need to increase our positive emotion. So coming back to this upward, downward spiral, there's a lot of research by a researcher by the name of Barbara Fredrickson looking at positivity. And what she originally hypothesized is that she thought that as we increase our positive emotion, we broaden our awareness and we build resources. And all the study that's been done on this shows that that is true. As our positive emotion increases, we see more possibilities. We actually have more peripheral vision. And we build things like optimism, and we can measure these. We have better resilience, we are more open, we're more accepting, we have more of a sense of purpose, immunity, and then things that affect our physical health, like blood pressure and decreased pain and fewer colds and better sleep. And of course, all of these things help us to be better at leading our teams and our organizations. So this is the work of Barbara Fredrickson. And I wanted to ask you another question. So in the chat box right now, how many positive emotions to negative emotions do you think that we need to have in order to see that benefit, to increase our positive emotion and see those benefits like increased optimism and resilience? What do you think the ratio is? Like, would it be 5 to 1, or what do you think? So just I see 3 positive emotions, 1 to 3. Anyone else? Well, it's actually 3 to 2, 2 to 1. Yeah, it's actually 3 to 1. So we need to have at least 3 positive emotions to 1 negative, or it could be upwards, it could be 4 or 5, but at least 3 to 1 helps us to see the benefit. And there's ways that we can do that. Where do you think most people are at? If you did a test right now and it showed you how many positive to negative emotions you have, what do you think it would be if you haven't been doing anything to improve this? So this is just the average. For the average person, what do you think? 10 to 1. Do you mean like 1 positive to 10 negative? Yeah, okay. 1 to 5. Yeah. what actually is true is that most people are at about a 2 to 1. So we have more positive than negative, but it's not enough. It's not getting us over that tipping point. And so how do we change that? Oh, and before we move on, if you want to check your positivity ratio, you can go to this website, www.positivityresonance.com, and you can take a free test, and it will ask you a bunch of questions about the last 24 hours of your life. So know that it's just a snapshot. It's just what's happened in the last 24 hours of your life. Thank you for putting that in the chat box, so you can go to it there. And then you can do some things to improve your positivity, and you can go back and take that test again and see what happens, and it does change. You just go back here a second. Yeah. So I want to move, we will come back to that, and we'll at the end, we're going to talk more about individual practices that we can utilize to bring up our positive emotion. But I want to start from the organizational perspective. And so there is a framework called the 5D framework that is from the appreciative inquiry world. And I will give you a resource at the end where you can find it. And this is a framework that I use when I'm working with organizations to help them converse together to move their culture in a more positive direction. And the 5 Ds stand for define. What is the task? What are we trying to do here? Discover, looking at what's the best of what is. I'll come back and just describe these better. Dream, what might be. Design, co-constructing, and deploy, embedding what's new into the future. So let me give you an example, a story of a company that I worked with fairly recently, a social services organization. They had about 150 employees. And so I used this framework, and the first thing that we did was to define what we wanted to do. So they wanted to improve their culture. They had a pretty good culture, but they wanted to see what they could do to improve it. And so I just worked with the executive team to define that. It's better to work with just a few people to find what the task is. And then we went in with the whole group for the rest of it. And we had a full day, 1-day session with all of the employees and all of the management. And that session was really all about the next D, which is discover. So in that discover phase, what you're doing is you're discovering what's out there, what's the research, what are other companies doing, what might work for us. But you're also looking at what's the best of what's going on in our organization. What are our strengths? What do we have to build on? And so in that session, I shared a lot of research. We did a lot of activities. And one of the activities we did was the SOAR analysis. And I'm going to share that with you next, which was a tool that you can use with groups of people. And it helps them to discover what their strengths are and where they can go. After that, we had a full day session with the executive team. And we worked through the rest of the Ds. And so they took all the information from the employees, everything, we gathered all the input that employees had to say. And with the executive team, we did some brainstorming. What are our dreams? What's possible? How can we change the culture for the better? Then we worked on design, which is like developing a strategic plan, co-constructing that together. And then the deploy stage is, how are we actually going to make this happen, and by when, and who's going to take charge, etc. So that's a framework that is readily available. It's free. And I took this from the Conversations Worth Having book, which I'll show you at the end. But you can find it easily online. And so in this session, in the all-staff retreat, as I said, we used the SOAR, and we used a number of other tools. And then in the leadership planning, we used the results of the SOAR and positive organizing assessment, which I'll also share with you. So what is the SOAR? The SOAR analysis is an analysis that asks you to look at what are the strengths in this organization, what are the opportunities available to us, what are our aspirations, and what are the results that we want to see. Now, it might look kind of familiar. Has anyone used this before? Hands up, no? Has anyone used a SWOT analysis before? Probably most people. Yeah. If you have used the SWOT, you might sort of recognize the letters, because if we look at this next slide, the SWOT analysis, and this is an analysis that a lot of organizations use to measure what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, what are our opportunities, and what are our threats. What has been found through the research is that using the SWOT tends to be a little bit more negative. We tend to focus more on our weaknesses and our threats, and people are saying they've used the SWOT, and a lot of people have. When we switch to the SOAR analysis, we're not ignoring our weaknesses and our threats. We are just enveloping those into opportunities. So we're spending more time on where we want to go and the positive direction versus where we've been. And we find that people get better results this way. I want to just do a little exercise with you that will hopefully show you the difference between the two. So what I'd like you to do is, just on a piece of paper, we're going to take 1 minute, and I want you to do a SWOT analysis on yourself. So thinking about you, what are your strengths? Take a few seconds to write down a few things that you're good at. Okay, what are your weaknesses? And moving on, what are some opportunities that you think are available to you right now? What opportunities do you have? Okay, and lastly, what are the threats to you? Are you scared you might lose your job? Or, are there threats in your personal life? What are the threats that you're facing right now? Okay. I would like you to take a moment and just write in the chat box, how do you feel right now? After doing that, how did that make you feel? Just a word or two. Alive, someone says, okay. Yeah, because when we're living, we have all these things that happen to us, yeah. Worried, Andre says, yeah. I felt a bit that way when I did it. Anyone else? Attentive? Human, yeah. Felt the negative had more weight. Apprehensive. Yeah, I had that same thought when I did this exercise for the first time. I felt pretty negative after doing the SWOT. But we're going to do the SOAR now. We're going to take 1 minute, and let's just see how you feel after this. So write down a few strengths that you have that you didn't mention before. Is there anything else that you're good at that you didn't have time to write down? Write those things down. Okay, what opportunities are out there for you? Are there some new opportunities that are showing up for you? Maybe things you hadn't thought about. Let's write down a few opportunities that are available to you. Okay, this is a fun one. Your aspirations. What do you aspire to be? What are some aspirations you have for the rest of this year, for the next 3, 5, 10 years? And lastly, what kind of results are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to achieve in your work right now, in your family, things outside of work? Okay. Write a word or two in the chat box about how you feel now. Much better. Someone said sad from the first one. Much better, positively challenged, inspired. I was concerned, now I'm more optimistic. Exactly. Right. And we've just taken like 1 minute. This has been such a brief little survey, right? I felt the same. This really showed me the difference between the two. Now think about if you do this with your team or you do this with your organization, how much more empowering is this for the people who you're working with to be focusing on where you're going, your strengths, your opportunities, aspirations, and results, than to be focusing on the negative things that have happened in the past. So this is a great tool. I find there's no tool I use that people get more engaged in than this one. You get a group of people together and they just get, they're talking and they're excited and they're happy and they're coming up with ideas. And when I used this with the social services agency that I was talking about before, there was such a buzz in the room and they came up with so many great ideas. So when we took that back and we talked about that as the executive team, the executive was able to say, okay, we can do, you know, the employees came up with all these suggestions and the executive was like, yeah, we can do that, we can do that. And they were putting things in place immediately. So then the employees were getting the feedback that I'm being listened to and positive change is happening. And so it was probably the best tool we could have used. So I really suggest that you use this in your, you know, in your assessments when you're looking at where have you been, you're debriefing things, you know, where are you going to go in the future? Try this simple little tool called the SOAR. There is a little book called The Little Book of SOAR, and you can get it on Amazon. But this is also in the Conversations Worth Having book that I'll share with you after. So there's places, and you can probably just find this online as well. But The Little Book of SOAR and Conversations Worth Having have a lot of background information that might help you if you're using this tool. So another tool that we can use when we're looking at organizational change, and this comes from the work of Dr. Robert Quinn, who's pictured here, and Dr. Kim Cameron, who started the Center for Positive Organizations out of the University of Michigan. And they've done about 30 or 40 years of research now on organizations that are more positive than others and have better results, including financial results as a result. And they started to do this research because what they found is that most of the research on business at the time, we're talking 30 or 40 years ago, was on when something is wrong, how do you fix it? So it was like getting to that midline, you know, fixing the problems, but it wasn't really looking at excellence. How can we be an excellent organization? And what does that look like? And when they studied these organizations, they found that there were 5 practices that positive organizations follow that others don't. The first one is finding purpose. So having a real sense of a purpose statement, not just a mission and vision, but why do we exist? And also helping individuals to tap into that. So what is my purpose as a leader? What is my purpose as an employee? And how does that fit with the purpose of the organization? The second one was we have authentic conversation. So we don't just say what we're supposed to say. We actually, if there's a problem, we talk about it. You know, we have psychological safety. So, you know, if there's a mistake, if I make a mistake, I can bring that up. I don't have to hide it. They see the possibilities. So there's got to be a lot of positivity in these people if they're seeing more possibilities. And there's a focus on the common good. So like we showed with the SOAR, we're looking at, you know, what is working, what are our strengths, where are we going versus focusing on the negative. And there's a trust in the emergent process. We don't always know how we're going to get somewhere, but it's that trust that we're doing the right things and we're going to, you know, have the right results. So when I was writing my book, Robert Quinn gave me permission to use 5 quick assessments on these 5 different areas. And so these are in my book. If you're getting my book later, you'll have those. But they're also, they originally in his book called The Positive Organization. So you can look for that and get all of the background information about how this came about. But I just wanted to show you one of the quick assessments. So this is just one on purpose. And so when it's a self-assessment, so you'd be looking at your organization and you'd be asking yourself these questions. For example, do we just work to make money? Would be a 1. We work for a higher purpose would be a 10. And then you'd be circling the number where you think your organization or your team falls. So maybe it's a 6 or a 7. Our work lacks meaning would be a 1. Our work has meaning would be a 10. We lack a sense of shared purpose would be a 1. We have a sense of shared purpose would be a 10. We do only what we're assigned to do would be a 1. We do what we love to do is a 10. And we do not get meaningful feedback would be a 1, and we get meaningful feedback would be a 10. So that's 5 quick questions that help you assess where you're at in terms of purpose. And then there are 4 more of these assessments with 5 questions each that help you to look at authentic conversation and trusting the emergent process, etc. So this I just wanted to share briefly is another tool that you can use to assess your organization and then decide, okay, which one of these assessments you know, do we need to work on? And then you can work on those particular ones and then move on to another one. I'm just having a yes, that's fine. Sorry, there's a question here about using AI companion. And I've just said yes to that, but I don't know if there's anything else I need to do. Okay, so what we know about culture is that culture is the most important determinant of health for people in the workplace. So if your culture, you know, it doesn't matter how many great programs you have, you know, what kind of systems you have. If you have a bad culture, that's going to affect people's health more than anything. But what we also know is that people's most immediate culture is their team. So when I think about, you know, my best work experience, I'm thinking about those people I work with every day on my team. And so if we can shift the culture in our teams, we can, you know, reach that tipping point and ripple out and start to change the culture within the organization. In teams, if we're looking at trying to improve positivity and resilience in our teams, how many positive to negative interactions do you think the most effective teams have? So we looked at earlier how many positive emotions do we need to have to negative to be, have a lot of benefit. In our teams, we're talking about interactions. So positive interactions to negative. What do you think the number is? And you can put this up on in your chat box. Just guess. Positive to negative. What's the optimum? Okay, there's a couple people said 3-1. Juliana said 5-1. Pamela 5-1. You're exactly right. It's 5-1. We need way more positive interaction than negative in our teams in order to have really successful, high-performing teams. Where do you think that most organizations are at, or most teams? What do you think the ratio is for most teams? It's not 5-1. Considering that, for personal emotions, we're usually at like a 2-1. When we look at interactions in our teams, Juliana says 1-1. Marcelo says 1-1. 2-1. Yeah, you guys are right. It's 1-1. So what that looks like is anytime someone says something positive in your team meeting, like, hey, I've got this great idea. Why don't we do it this way? And then the next comment is, well, that's not going to work, or, we've always done it this way, or the problem with that is, and so we have these, a negative for every positive. And what happens is those people that are coming up with those positive ideas stop coming up with those ideas. They just don't share because it's so negative, right? And I see people's heads nodding. So just a second here. There we go. So how do we create positive and resilient teams? What's something that we can do? Some of the research, a lot of the research on teams has been done by Dr. Michael West and his colleagues in the University of Lancaster in England. And what they've found, a lot of that research has been with healthcare. And what they've found is that a 5% increase in positive, resilient teams means a 3.3% decline in patient mortality. So less people die in hospitals where we have more positivity and resilience. I just thought that was so astounding when I first heard that stat. For the average hospital in the UK, that means about 40 deaths per year that could be prevented if we had more positivity and resilience in our teams. Now, why is that? What is it that happens when we have negativity and we don't have resilience in our teams? What happens that might cause this increase in mortality? And you can unmute, or you can put your thoughts in the chat box. Poor communication or decision-making, definitely. Yep, stress. Yeah, all of those things are right. And what happens when all of that happens is that we make more mistakes and there are more accidents. And that's why more people die, right? I mean, you're in a healthcare situation where you're dealing with patients who need you to be doing things right. And if there's no psychological safety, I'm not going to ask. I'm just going to do, or I'm going to make a mistake and I'm not going to tell anyone. because I don't feel psychologically safe. And so we get these terrible results. Now, you may work in healthcare. I don't know where everybody works here, but wherever you work, maybe it's not healthcare, but what would the impact be of improving positivity and resilience in your team? Like, what mistakes or accidents would not occur if you had more positivity and resilience in your teams? And if you want, you can put some things in the chat box, or you can unmute and share. That's fine too. One thing I think about is repetition. You know, when we do things wrong and then we have to redo them again. Things are coming in fast now. So we would become more productive and connected with each other. Yeah. Better communication, and with that, less misunderstanding, which leads to relation problems. Yes. Greater productivity. Yeah. Less stress and irritability. Yeah, Marcelo says I work in a hospital, so you know exactly what we're talking about. So how can we increase positivity and resilience in our teams? I'm going to just share a few simple things that we can do, and then some that are a little bit more complex. One of the things that Dr. Michael West talks about a lot, and he has a book called Teamwork that's excellent, and it talks about this concept called social reflexivity, which is really how do we relate to each other in our teams? So we often, measure how productive we are in terms of what we get done and do we get things done on time. But we often don't measure how it is that we're working together. And if we do that, that's called social reflexivity. We become way more effective and way more productive. So some of the things that he talks about are just very basic things, like having guidelines. Like, does your team have a set of guidelines? Lots of teams don't. Why do we exist as a team? What is it we're trying to achieve? Guidelines around your meetings, when you have meetings, how long the meetings are, a sense of purpose. And this comes back to, what Quinn talked about in companies that are more successful. Positive organizations have a real sense of purpose. What's the purpose of your team? Do you have a purpose statement? What are your goals? What are your values? We often have values for our organization, but not necessarily for our team. And you could do that as a team. You could say, what do we believe in? What are our values? And then it makes your decision-making easier, because if it fits with the values, yes, we do it. And if it doesn't, then why are we doing this? And a vision. So those are some of the basic things. And then there are practices that are easy to put in place, like starting meetings with a check-in or a win instead of just getting right to the agenda. How is everybody? And I worked on teams before where we had to come with a win every time. So you had to really challenge yourself to find, what did I win at this week? What did we win at as a team? I got to bring that and share that, and everybody shared a win, and it changes the culture of your meeting when you start with something positive like that. And then positivity, gratitude, and we're going to get into this when we talk more about individual practices, but even starting your meeting with a round of gratitude. Everybody could share something they're grateful for, and often they bring up other people. I'm grateful for somebody else on the team and how they helped me with the particular project. Mindfulness, taking a moment, just a mindful moment to arrive in the room and forget about what happened before and just be in the present. This morning, I did a yoga class before I met with you, and it was just a great hour to become really mindful and forget about everything that's going on and just become very calm. Positive language, celebrations, cakes, birthdays, celebrating things that people have achieved. Just on the note of gratitude, this is a couple of, the top one is just a gratitude board where people, were asked to put up things that they're grateful for. And you could have that in your team meeting room, or you can have something like that online that people add to. The bottom part is something that a team did where they put up something that they were grateful about each person on the team, and that was up in the team room. So just some simple ideas. Something else that can have such a great effect on team positivity and resilience is doing a team debrief. So it's when we do an effective team debrief, and I'll talk about what that is, it's basically just taking 5 minutes at the end of your meeting to debrief how the meeting went, and we'll talk about what it should include. But when people do really good team debriefs, those teams are almost 40% more effective than teams that don't. I see a comment in here. At my work, we create some leisure activities such as movie sessions and wellness talks. That's great. But we don't have, oh, I see, memberships like to fitness centers and things. Yeah, thank you. So if you wanted to incorporate a team debrief into how you do your work in your team, and I think this is even more important when you're in a virtual environment, because you're not seeing each other personally. Sometimes it's more important to do this. What you want to do in that 5 minutes at the end of your meeting is, first of all, a reflection. Give people a minute to think. I've done that throughout this session with you, left you for a minute to think about something and write it down before you share it. Have people do that. Have a short discussion. And it's really about how did we do in this meeting? Was the meeting positive? Did everyone get a chance to speak? Are we just hearing from the loudest people? What can we do better around our meeting, how we run our meetings? A little bit of self-discovery, like what can I do to improve it? So it's not just as the team, but what can each individual bring? And then some goal setting for the next meeting. And if we do this really well, and we do it consistently, we start to get much better at working together as a team. There is a lot of information on this in my book. And then there's a lot of research articles that you can access on the web about team debriefs. So let's just move on to what we can do to shift our own behavior as leaders personally to become more positive. And some of the things that leaders can do, we can practice gratitude ourselves. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how we do that effectively. But when gratitude is one of those practices that is one of the simplest things you can do that increases your positive emotion. So if you're one of those people that has, 2 positives to every negative, you can increase it to 3 or 4 to 1 just by doing gratitude. Excuse me. Something else we can do is we can learn to use generative questions in our communication so that we're not reacting, that we're asking more questions, we're asking questions that generate new things that we don't know. So we'll talk about that. And we can also develop resilient cycles. We all get into vicious cycles. And so recognizing what those vicious cycles are and then developing resilient cycles. Excuse me. In my book, the whole book is focused on daily practices that help us improve culture. And so these things are in there as well as a lot of other practices. So let's just talk about gratitude for a minute. We'll go back, excuse me, to this upward downward spiral. And, gratitude is one of the positive practices that we can put in place that takes us up the spiral where we can be more positive. And as we talked about before, as we go up that spiral, we start to see more possibilities and we start to see these benefits in terms of resources. And so the practice of gratitude, excuse me, is just writing down at least 3 things every day that you're grateful for. It's so simple. It takes you 30 seconds a day, and it can have such a big impact. And yet most of us probably don't do it. I'm with a group of women right now on this gratitude chain, and everybody writes in an email to the group, 3 things they're grateful for every day. And what it does is it reminds, when I see the email, it reminds me, oh, I need to do my gratitude. And so that's really helpful. They do say that writing with, just writing with a pen versus typing tends to imprint in your brain to, the things that you're grateful for. But the reason it works is that typically when you are writing down what you're grateful for, you're bringing up those positive memories again. So you're writing about something that you have done or an experience you had that was very positive. And then when you write about it, you bring it back. So your brain doesn't really know the difference between when it actually happened and when you're thinking about it. It just brings those positive emotions back. And so if we do this every day, we start to go up that ratio to 3 to 1 or higher. And I really would recommend that you do your positivity test on positivityresonance.com, see where you're at, and then try gratitude for 30 days or so, and then see what happens. What I did when I was experimenting with this is I made this chart where I wrote down 3 things every day that I was grateful for, but then I also had observations on the side. And I was writing down things that happened that maybe were because of the gratitude. And so I just started to make note of those things. And what I found is that it takes at least a couple of weeks usually before you notice any change. But then what happens is your brain is looking for those things. Because you're looking for things you're grateful for, your brain starts to do that. And then things start to change. You might find that you start to reframe negative situations to be more positive. You might find that you feel happier, or you're more optimistic. And so it'd be interesting to do this for 30 days and write down what happens to you and just experiment with it yourself. Where this came from was there's a lot of studies on gratitude, but the first one was back in about 2003, Emmons and McCullough, and they studied gratitude with groups of university students. So they gave the students, one group of students, they gave them a gratitude journal, and they asked them to write down 3 things they were grateful for every day. They gave another group a journal and just said, just write about your day, just journal every day, didn't give them any instruction. And the third group, they gave a journal, and they asked them to write down all of the negative things that happened to them in the day. And the difference was significant between those that wrote the gratitude compared to both of the others. So just journaling, we tend to focus on the negative, or those people that wrote about the negative. And there was a big significant difference between those and the gratitude group in terms of optimism and resilience and the various things that they were measuring. So they found that the gratitude group had more appreciation, they had higher levels of positive emotion, they felt happier, they had more energy, and they were more optimistic. So I encourage you to try that. That's one leadership practice that we can all easily put into place. The second one I wanted to talk about is generative questions. So just shifting the dynamics of our conversations as leaders. And we can do that by simply asking questions. But there are different kinds of questions, of course. We can ask questions that are very negative, like, what were you thinking? Why did you do that? very directive, or there are generative questions, like, I'm curious about your thought process here, and, I'd like to understand that better. And so there are ways that we can use generative questions to shift our tone and the direction of any conversation from negative to positive, just to create new compelling images and change the way people think. So here's an example. What is the result you want to create? And this came from a story that Robert Quinn told me, about a CEO that was working with him in some leadership workshops that he was doing. And after the workshops, the CEOs went back to their workplaces and they were trying to incorporate some of the new practices. And then Quinn and Cameron called them a few months later to say, what did you do? What did you change? And this one CEO said, I just came back. I didn't change anything. I wanted to just think about, what would be the most effective thing I could do to change my culture. And after a while, he noticed that he was spending most of his time fixing problems. As people would come to his office and they would have an issue and they would want him to fix it. And that's what he was doing. And that wasn't a great use of his time, nor was it helping to empower those people to find their own solutions. So he wrote this question on the whiteboard in his office. What is the result that you want to create? And when people would come into his office then with a problem, he would just point to the whiteboard and say, what's the result you want to create? What's the result you're looking for? Come back to me when you know that. And people would go away. And by the time they came back to him, knowing the result they wanted to create, they also knew how they were going to get there. So it saved, he said it changed the culture in that organization more than anything else he'd ever done, because it just empowered people to, think in a different way. And it was just by using one question. Okay. So generative questions can be super, you can see great results if you can come up with the right questions. And, generative questions can really flip people's mindset from that, the brain that we showed before with the reptile brain, that area of protect, and going in a downward spiral to looking at the positive. What's the result we want? Where do we want to go? So here's just a few simple questions that are generative. If we have finished a project and we didn't have the result we wanted, we could focus on what went wrong, or we could ask, what have we learned? What might be possible next time? What's one small action we can take to improve things? What else might be true? Sometimes we make assumptions. And if we ask ourselves, this is my favorite question, what else might be true? Do I have all the information? I might be assuming the wrong thing. So that's just a brief overview of generative questions. And in the Conversations Worth Having book that I'll share the covers of these at the end. There's a whole section on generative questions, so that's a good place to go. The last thing that I want to share in terms of personal practices is vicious and resilient cycles. So moving from those vicious cycles, anybody ever get into a vicious cycle? We all do. To how do we create resilient cycles? So I'll just share with you one of my vicious cycles. And it looks like this. I'm a professional, and I'm trying to do good for the world. But when things get tough, I just put my head down and I work harder. Does anybody do that? I'm just going to get through this project, so I'm just going to work, a whole bunch of evenings. I'm going to skip my lunch. I'm just going to work harder. I'm going to get this done, and then I'll rest, right? But what happens is I would get tired and things start to get messy. I'm not eating properly. I'm not going to the gym. I'm not getting enough sleep. And I feel worse. but I keep going because I got to get this project done, or I've got to put on this event, and I get burnt out. This is how one of my cycles that led, one of the things that led to burnout years ago. But hey, I'm burned out, but I'm going to keep going because I've got all this stuff to share, right? So that is a vicious cycle that I realized that I can get into. And when you name your vicious cycles, and I would really challenge you to do this, like make a circle and think about the vicious cycles that you get stuck in, and what are the steps, what leads you there. And once you name that, then it's much easier to write, what would be a resilient cycle that will help me out of that. Because now what I do is when I get into that, I'm busy, things get tough. Instead of just putting my head down and working harder, I consciously choose more sleep, which seems counterintuitive. But of course, when I sleep more, I'm more productive and I'm more alert and I see more possibilities. I choose to make sure that I'm getting enough exercise and that I'm meditating, even just for a few minutes a day. And what that does is it just helps me to have more clear priorities, to be more effective, and not to go into that burnout cycle. I heard someone talk about this a few years ago in a seminar, and she was just talking about these, she called them circles, a vicious circle and a resilient circle, and light bulb just went off for me. And I wrote down mine in just a few seconds because it was just became so clear, because we don't always recognize what takes us into those cycles, but we know we get into them. So if you can recognize it first, and then you can draw your resilience cycle and put it up somewhere to remind yourself, you can turn those things around pretty easily. So I'm just starting to wrap up a bit. I just wanted to share this in terms of leading change. Some of the things that we talked about to use organizationally are the 5D framework or model. That's a great model to use if you're working with a group in your organization to try to create change. The SOAR analysis, I can't say enough good things about how engaged people get and how much information we get when we use this assessment. The positive organizing assessments of Dr. Quinn and Cameron are great to kind of assess your organization and team in terms of how positive you are and what changes you can make. And then when we move into teams, we've talked about things like team guidelines and purpose and values, and learning how to do effective team debriefs so that we can continually improve our teams and become more positive and resilient. And then when we move into thinking about what we can do as leaders to change our own habits, there's so many things we can do, but we talked about gratitude, we talked about generative questions and resilient cycles. So these are some of the resources that I've mentioned. The top left-hand corner is my book, A Better Place to Work, Daily Practices That Transform Culture, which is available in hard copy and well, it's a paperback, and yes, Andre has one, and ebook as well. And so a lot of the practices I shared today are in there. Down below that, the book Conversations Worth Having, which is based on appreciative inquiry by Jackie Stavros and Sherry Torres, is excellent. I read that book and then I got so excited about it. I contacted them. They were doing a training program, so I became a trainer and started to teach that course because it's so useful. And so that's where the 5D model and the SOAR, you can find information on that. And then recently, I just published a book as a co-author with Jackie and Sherry and some other people who teach Conversations Worth Having. And this one is called Conversations Worth Having with Yourself. And it's a quick start guide for building resilience. So if that's something you're interested in, It's a short book, a small book, about 50 pages, and there's a number of practices that you can use to build resilience. So you can get all of these on Amazon. You can also get them on my website, deborahconnors.com. And if you do go there, we have a deal on right now. So if you buy the quick start guide as an ebook, I'll send you that by email. But you get 50% off the hard copy of A Better Place to Work, which would be mailed to you. So that deal is there for you if you're interested. Oh yes, I have another opportunity for you. So this is a little just a feedback form that I would love to get your feedback today. And I've just asked that it be emailed out to you later. And you could email it back into, I guess, Andre or the conference organizing group. And I would just like, it's just one question. What are you taking away from this session today? So if you want to think about that and email that in when it comes. And if you do that, you have the opportunity to be in a draw for a free copy of the new book, The Conversations Worth Having with Yourself. Next week, I will take all of the feedback forms that came in, we'll do a draw, and we'll send an email out with a PDF copy of this book for somebody, some lucky person. And all you don't have to put I guess you have to put your name on here in your email in order to get the book. So to give feedback, you don't have to do that. But if you want to be in the draw, I need that. We will not put you on our mailing list unless you check the little box here. And if you do, then you can get our free e-newsletter, which comes out very infrequently, about 3 or 4 times a year. So chance to win that book. And I just have 3 slides left. I wanted to say that, in terms of shifting culture, strategies and tools are super important, but it really starts with with individual leaders. And if we can change our own patterns and our own behavior and our own practices, that's how we start to shift. Culture does not shift in any other way than if we change our practices as individuals. So as a checkout here, I would just like to know, what is one opportunity that you'll take this week to use something that you heard today? And if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat box, what is one thing that you're going to do as a result of what you've heard? And if you have any questions at this time, you're welcome to put them in there as well. Somebody's going to do the gratitude journal. Oh, the debrief for team meetings. Yes, so simple and so effective. Yeah. What about the rest of you? 30-day gratitude technique. Yeah, highly recommend that. SOAR. Excellent. Gratitude journal, the SOAR, the gratitude as a family practice. Yeah, that's great. Dinner time, do a little round of gratitude at the table. The SOAR. Again, so simple. These tools are so simple, so easy to use and so effective. Create my gratitude board and write my resilience cycle and the SOAR. Yeah, lots of things. I have a it's not a gratitude board, it's a vision board, but it's very, if you talk about aspiration, it's like it's right here on my wall. I look at it every day. It's really empowering. The resilience cycle, yes. Again, very simple to do, resilient cycle. Okay, I'm very happy to see that so many people are going to put these things in place, and you can do them tomorrow, right? It doesn't take any preparation. So thank you for your attention and your engagement and your energy today. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Wish you all well, and I'm going to turn this back. I'm going to quit sharing here. There we go.
Wow.
Turn this back over.
Yeah, yes. Deborah, once again, thank you very much for all your contributions. It was incredible, and it was a great to see and hear from you.
Yeah,
So just
you.
guys, I took some training courses with Deborah, and I have since used much of what I learned from her in my work with companies. And I suggest you guys to follow her,
Yes,
and buy the book.
please connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram. My business is on Facebook, Well Advised Consulting. It would be lovely to stay in touch.
Yes, yes. Hey, we can to take a picture?
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
yeah.
Yes.
All right, all right. Okay.
Let me just fix my hair. No.
Aham. Se vocês puderem abrir as câmeras, quem tiver por aí. E também, quem quiser fazer, colocar alguma pergunta, alguma colocação, aproveita esse momento, tá? Então, arrumem. A Ju, tem uma pergunta? Então, aproveite.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see your faces.
I have a quick question, Deborah. I was curious. When you were sharing those information about the ratios between positive and negative emotions and with the teams as well, is that like a worldwide research, or it does that depend on the country culture as well?
That's a very good question. I believe it's worldwide. I know Barbara Fredrickson's work is, based on a whole bunch of studies that have been done. I think most of it has been done in the US, but I'm sure that there have been, and I don't know this for sure, but I'm betting that there was studies done elsewhere. And with the companies, or the 5-to-1 ratio for teams, I know that a lot of that research was done in England as well. So it's, at least in Europe and North America. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious, like PSSM people, how this would work here in Brazil if the ratio is the same.
Mhm. Well, I think it was definitely a big enough sample size that it's probably applicable to people in general. But
Right.
that's a very good question. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deborah.
Oh,
Everything is
welcome.
so useful. It's so practical. Thank you for sharing. Very
Yes,
generous
welcome.
of you. Thank you.
Mhm.
all right. Picture for everyone. 1, 2, 3. Once more. All right.
Great.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you, Deborah. Big hugs for everybody. Yes.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Obrigado, pessoal. Obrigado mais uma vez. Amanhã tem mais. Até amanhã, pessoal. Obrigado pela presença.
Bye.